That's another example, though, and I was talking about this earlier in the week, Mike. The old correlation does not necessarily imply causation argument. Like, did Green Bay have a bunch of 700-yard receivers because they don't have A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith? I would say that's the reason they had 700-yard receivers.
Yeah, Dobbs. I think Romeo Dobbs with
exactly.
Like,
Jaden Reed, Bo Melton, Dontavian Wicks. They had like 5 guys. And by the way, Christian Watson's their best receiver. He's always hurt. If he were healthy, he'd have, he would spike ahead of the others. Jaden Reed was hurt as well. Those are their 2 top receivers. And then here comes Dobbs and Wicks and Melton and everybody else.
It is like a dynamic, though, where you had these 2 guys that dominated everything. And you're just trying to get those 2 guys, which over time, teams said, we're not going to let you get these 2 guys. You're going to have to find a 3rd or 4th guy. And they never were able to find a 3rd or 4th guy that they could find a rhythm or trust in. It was always the 2 guys. And over 4 years, teams were saying, you're not beating us with these 2 guys. And they could never pivot off of those 2 and go to Dotson and have him be a bigger part of the offense. So now you're wondering, can they create a scenario where, hey, this game Smith is getting 7 and the next game Lemon's getting 7 and then Wicks is getting, where they can kind of keep the defense off balance because you have multiple. It's almost like having a staff of number 2 and 3 starters instead of having that top of the line ace.
Yeah, I made the base, but they have a bunch of 4s though, not 2s and 3s. They got a bunch of 4s with
Smith, you would say, is probably
Smith is a 1 or a.
Well, that's
or a
the interesting part. Is Smith is better than everybody for the most part that Green Bay has had. So do you look at it like what Seattle had last year with Smith and Jigba, where he had like 1,500 yards, and then nobody else was close to him?
That to me is yes, the better. I try to feed the ball to DeVonta Smith as much as I can. I think that's everything. I think, in the quarterback's part of it as well, Jordan Love is more willing to spread the football around, probably out of necessity. So maybe it becomes necessity to Jalen Hurts as well. Yeah. But I always want the better players. I always want the 1s and the 2s. Like, I don't want to spread the football around if I have Jackson Smith and Jigba or Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson, one of the top level receivers. I want to get them the football.
Sure. Well,
it's like if you have a big time scorer in the NBA, do you say, hey, we got to spread it around? No, you try to close the game out with the guy who gets you 30 a night every single night.
I get, but those guys are it's great to have for big plays and but you always need the chain mover, the guy who knows where to get that first down and reset the offense. And that's something that sometimes the Eagles struggled with because they were so insistent on getting the ball to those 2 guys, which is great. But again, it was like, hey, if you need to get this, how are you going to get it there?
But, the Eagles have never been an explosive offense in this era, in the Jalen Hurts era. They've never been an explosive offense, but they've been.
What they did, though, was take a lot of one-on-one shots down the field, the 50-50 balls.
Yeah.
And at times they were very good at it and other times not so good.
But this passing game is predicated on a good running game. And that's, people forget how good they ran the football pre-Saquon Barkley. So, Nick's been here 5 years. They've had a top 10 offense EPA-wise for the advanced nerds 4 times, and last year was the first time they didn't. And what's the difference? The running game imploded.
Well, and that's a good conversation to bring up, though, John, is they had a great running game before Barkley. When they got Barkley, the running game went from great to elite. So then you go back to, did this running game just completely get figured out, or did the offensive line not perform at the level it had been performing at? that factored into the running game going from great to elite to mediocre. So, like, in other words, do you really need to overhaul your run game, or was it based on the fact that, hey, your offensive line was banged up last year?
I think it was the banged up aspect, and I've said that from the start. I think the Eagles overreacted.
Like, I think we all
Changing.
could agree that they needed to add some layers to the passing game, especially if you're losing A.J. Brown. But do you really need to overhaul your run game too, or do you need your offensive line just to be healthy and perform at a higher level?
Well, I think they hired a scheme, and the scheme demands that you change your running philosophy, because the goal of the Shanahan scheme is to marry the run game with the pass game, so everything looks the same.
Right.
Basically, the inverse Vic Fangio philosophy on defense, make everything look the same. So you have to change. And I always go back to the old cliche in the NFL, which is, if you're hiring a scheme, you're doing it wrong. You're not hiring Kyle Shanahan. You're going to the Xerox copy, Mike. You're making copies, and what happens when you make copies? You know, the 10th one is not as sharp as the first one. And as you go down the list, Sean Desai ran Vic Fangio's scheme. Did it look like Vic Fangio's scheme? He ran it.
Yeah, not very much. I'll tell you, the run game is certainly going to look a lot different here. You would think have you noticed a lot of shotgun RPO stuff? Is that still in the mix?
Oh, it's still in the mix, yeah. Especially in the red zone.
Okay.
A lot of pistol in the red zone. And I went back and looked at some Green Bay stuff. They use it a lot too. So you can see they're basically running the Green Bay version of and it makes sense, obviously, where he just came from, but they're basically running the Green Bay offense. So you're going to see shotgun, you're going to see pistol. It's not going to be 100% under center for people who think that.
Which you shouldn't think that was going to be 100%, right?
Yeah. And you're going to see plenty of it. And it's picked up later in camp too. There's been more of it as we've gotten later into camp. Whether that's an adjustment, I don't know, but it would make some sense, because that's all Jalen Hurts has done, not only in the pro level, but in the college, at the college level as well. So
Dave McKeon shotgun a lot too.
Oh yeah. And so I think people are going to be surprised how much there is, to be honest, because it seems to be picking up. It's still going to go under center way more than they typically did in years past, but it's going to be a blending, which is what Sean said the first time we talked about it. I mean, he's not lying. It's going to be a little bit of a blend, and we're going to see what it looks like in the finished product. But one thing I would guarantee, Mike, is you're going to see some growing pains. And there's some growing pains here at